The Army, E4, Spec 4, and then the Air Force, I became a captain.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted.
You started in the Army?
In the Army.
Where were you living at the time you enlisted in the Army?
I was in college. It was in Marietta, Ohio. And I found an Army Reserve company in West Virginia.
Why did you enlist?
The draft was in full fashion at that time. I was in college. I needed extra income by serving with the reserves. Then I could actually generate some income, and I also could fulfill my obligation to the military.
So you enlisted in the Army Reserves?
Correct.
What year was that?
1965, March 1965.
So once you enlisted, did you have to go to basic training?
Yes, I did.
So where was your basic training?
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Yeah, don't sneer.
Could you tell me about your basic training? How long did it last? What did they train you? What was it like?
It lasted too long. I did both basic and advanced infantry training at Fort Leonard Wood.
Back to back, right in a row?
Yeah. During the winter, it was cold. Everything that was there was a rock. It was an experience. We had the old World War II wooden barracks with no insulation in them. It was an experience.
How long did basic last?
God, I don't know, Eileen. It was too long. Whether that was a month, 2 months, somewhere in that.
And then you just stayed right there for the advanced infantry training?
Yes. Yeah.
So what kinds of things did they teach you?
In advanced infantry training, I was in combat engineers.
Was that by your choice or the Army's?
No, when we went in, we had to do aptitude tests. And somehow my aptitude test must have indicated that that was a field that I would fit into. Next thing I knew, I was running bulldozers and road graders.
Had you had any prior training in running a big equipment?
No, I grew up. This was my maternal family farm, and being a farm, you were around equipment all the time. So tractors, trucks. I was just very, very comfortable on them.
So you had an aptitude for that. In addition to teaching you how to run the equipment, did you have classroom?
Yes, we did.
What kinds of things did they?
Most of that dealt with repair. So you had to be able to repair the piece of equipment itself. If it had an engine, then you had to be able to repair the engine. I remember learning welding. I was terrible at welding. But that was something similar, typical of what we learned. Diesel mechanics. Remember that, and I enjoyed diesel mechanics.
Because you were in the reserves, what was your responsibility to the military? Once you did your basic, were you allowed then to go back to college and continue your courses?
Correct. Yeah, I graduated May 1966, so it was about 1 year with the reserve and college.
Once you graduated from college, did you stay in the Army Reserve?
Yes, I did.
And what was your responsibility then? Was it like the weekend, 1 weekend a month kind of thing?
Yes, I think that's correct.
How long did you stay in the Army Reserve?
I think until November. I've got to catch myself on this one. I believe it was November 1968.
And what did you do then?
I had a chance to transfer to the Air Force and to get into officers training school in the Air Force.
Why did you choose the Air Force?
I'd taken an aptitude test again in college, and the Navy and the Air Force both were asking me to join because my aptitude was in as pilot. I was 98th percentile as pilot, and so they needed pilots at that time for Vietnam. They were recruiting. I thought it's a great idea.
Why did you think it was a great idea?
I love flying. When I was a kid, I was always building the models, and I'd build some planes and fly them off the roof of the house. And there was a little country fair in Goshen every year in September. And there was a field across the street from that fair, and there was an old barn burner, or barnstormer. They would bring in a plane, and you could give him $5 and he'd take you up for a ride. And every time he came in, and I was up there waiting to go up. I loved it. I loved it. And then on top of that, they brought a fighter to the college and had it in an airport near there. And they took me out and said, "Would you like a ride in the fighter?" And I said, "Hell yes." So that
sealed it, huh?
That sealed the deal. Yeah. I want to do one of these.
So you wanted to be a pilot, and why did you choose the Air Force even though the Navy was also looking at you?
The Navy's runways go up and down. So
you wanted a solid runway?
I like the idea of solid ground. Yeah.
So when did you transfer to the Air Force? What was the date?
And that was November '68. Just right out of the Army Reserves and right into Air Force Reserves.
Now, it was the Air Force Reserves. Since you'd already done basic training with the Army, did you have to redo it again for the Air Force?
No. The next training like that came in officers training school.
When did you go to officer training school?
February '69.
And where was that?
That was at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas.
Now, how long was the officer training school?
I think I started in February and it came out of there, I want to say May.
What kinds of things did they teach you in officer training school?
I think the heaviest part of the curriculum had to do with strategic classes. We had military history. We had an awful lot of classes. At that time, Russia was our biggest concern. So a lot of Russian intelligence. And then you would have discipline, marching, and parades.
Do you remember any of your instructors?
No, not at all.
So officer training school was more the officer part of it. You didn't receive any flight training yet.
Not there, no. You have to be an officer before you can get into flying training. So I had to get through that before I could even get in a plane.
When you graduated from the officer training, where did you go?
To Laredo Air Force Base in Texas.
For what?
For pilot training.
And that's where they actually trained you to fly.
Correct.
And is that the first time you had ever flown?
With my hands on the stick? Yeah.
How long was your flight training?
They call it the year of 53 weeks.
Really?
Yeah.
What did you train on?
First thing they try you on is a Cessna 172, a little single engine prop plane, civilian type. Either you're going to make it or you're not going to make it. That was easy. And then from there was a T-37, which is a small twin engine, fully acrobatic jet. And that they'll wash out some more people on that, but that was a ball. And then the third plane that you fly is a T-38, which is a twin engine fighter trainer, supersonic.
Wow.
Yep, cat's meow.
Well, so you were there for a year and 1 week. Was it all in the field in airplanes, or was it classroom training too? Was it 50-50, more in the field and more in the classroom?
More time in the classroom. Flight time is expensive time. So you might get an hour, hour and a half a day of flight time, and the rest of it was academics.
How long was the day? Like what typical 9 to 5?
Oh no, 7 to 7.
Wow.
And
And then you had homework?
hell yes, yeah. It was brutal, absolutely brutal.
How did you like it?
Loved it, loved every minute of it. The only thing I didn't like was when they taught us weather, and it was boring as hell. But you have to learn. So
So you were actually training, you knew you wanted to be a pilot. Do you choose what aircraft you will fly, or does the Air Force choose what they'll train you on?
it really, at that time, it was the Air Force
What they need?
telling us what they needed. When you graduate in pilot training, the Air Force will publish a list of planes that are available in the duty stations for those planes. When I came out, I was first in my class all the way through until the last class, and a guy beat me out by 1 point. And so the two of us were looking for fighters. Uh, there were none. He took a F-106, which is an interceptor, and I took an assignment, which was in Massachusetts, so I'd be closer to the family. And that was the B-52.
So that's how you ended up.
That's how I ended up in it.
Do you remember your graduation from flight school?
Yes, I do. My wife was living with me.
So you were already married.
Yes, I was. Yeah.
Your class, what class was it?
My flight training class was 70-07.
And that was all pilots.
Correct.
When you arrived at Westover, what were your duties?
I was a co-pilot.
Had you already
Yes.
flown the B-52?
No.
So you had, this was your first flight in a B-52?
My first exposure to it. I had seen them.
Had you, so you hadn't flown in a B-52 at all until you got to Westover. What can you tell me about the B-52? Size of the crew, what the purpose was?
Strategic bomber, originally designed for a nuclear deterrence mission. Plane was 185 feet wide, 159 feet long. Max gross weight for the one that I had up there was 480,000 pounds. Huge. 8 engines. So a flight crew of 6.
What were the positions?
A pilot and co-pilot. A navigator, and then a radar navigator, which was the bombardier. An electronic warfare officer, and in that plane it had a tail gunner.
Do you recall the first time you went up in the B-52?
Oh yeah.
What was that like?
It was in class, which the training for that was in Merced, California.
So you actually left Westover and went to
I had to
California
go.
for training?
Correct.
How long did you have to go there?
6 months.
So go ahead. What was it like the first time you went up?
Oh, that's fabulous. When you strap yourself onto 8 jet engines, that's a hoot. Yeah, the power of that plane is impressive. There we were. It was ours to do with.
Did you fall in love with it right away?
I did. Yeah.
So you were happy with the assignment to B-52s?
Yes, I was.
After you had 6 months of training in the B-52, you went back to Westover?
Correct.
How long did you stay there? That was your duty station?
That is correct. That was my duty station. We were sent to Vietnam immediately.
When you were
Hmm.
training, because now it's what year, 60, 69?
Well, that's 1970.
So in 1970, the war was heating up. Did you know that you were going to be going to Vietnam?
Yes, I did.
So when you got back to Westover, you got orders immediately to go to Vietnam?
They had to blend or marry me to a flight crew. And as soon as I was assigned into a flight crew, we went. And at that time, the Air Force would send a unit. Everybody would go. The B-52s went. The KC-135 tankers went. Our entire maintenance went. We had all our personnel people over there with us. They called it going cadre, and the entire Westover went.
Really? Which is unusual because everybody else was going as individuals. Had you trained with this crew, or was this a brand new crew that they put together?
We had a chance to train a little bit, not that much, but we were training for a nuclear mission, so not training for a conventional mission.
So how was that different?
Our nuclear missions were high altitude, going into at that time Russia. And when we got in country, then we would drop down and we would fly at 250 feet above the ground to penetrate under radar. So a big difference.
And what was nuclear? You were going to drop nuclear bombs?
Correct.
So the focus changed from Russia to Vietnam. Where, and was it all your missions going to be nuclear missions?
When I was at Westover, the answer is yes. When we went to Vietnam, we retained that nuclear mission, but we were flying conventional missions. So,
Where, when you went to Vietnam, where did you fly into?
to begin with, we flew out of Guam. And then the second place that we flew out of was Utapao, Thailand.
What was your first impression when you landed in Guam?
I hated it.
Why?
It was so hot and humid. You'd step out of the plane and immediately it was like you came out of a hot shower. It was unbelievable. You could cut the air. It was so heavy with moisture.
How long did you fly out of Guam before you moved to Thailand?
You know, I'd have to look at my logbooks to see, but we had a few months there, and then moved into Thailand because the missions in Thailand were so much quicker. Guam typical mission was 16 to 17 hours, and then from Utapao, Thailand into South Vietnam, we could do out and back in less than 4 hours.
When you were stationed in Guam, what kind of missions did you fly and how often?
It was a conventional mission, iron dome bombs. Most of the Guam missions were targeted against the Viet Cong in South Vietnam. And we had some of them that were attacking the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Laos and in Cambodia. And then we did some missions into southern North Vietnam, mostly the Ho Chi Minh Trail, going against Mugia Pass, the Bang Karai Pass. Those were repeat missions.
So you would fly missions and drop bombs in all these different places? How often would you be flying? Was there a schedule of like 1 day on, 2 days off?
It used to be, I think it was 5 days on and 3 days off. They had 5 straight missions. And then you'd have 3 days for rest. And then back five missions again. The first time I was over there, I think you and I were just looking at that one of those log books, and it was 51 missions in 105 days. So about, one mission every 2 days was an average.
Now, you said you were dropping the iron dome bombs. What's that?
It,
Must be more technical.
yeah, what can I tell you? It's a bomb. It's iron. Most of the ones we dropped were 500 pounders, and some of the missions call for a 750 pound. But those are the only two that we tended to drop in South Vietnam. And what can I tell you? 500 pounds. It's big. Um, probably about 8 feet long. And we would carry 105 of those on one of our missions. And another mission we carried was 112 of them.
Do you drop them all at one time, or do you space them out?
Over there, it was all at one time. And depending on the target, if we went against the Ho Chi Minh Trail as an example, you're working something where it's linear. And if they had a truck convoy that they had found, then they'd bring us in on that, and we would bomb it right down the trail, trying to get as many trucks as we could.
From your altitude, can you actually see what you're bombing? Can you see
No.
the trucks? So you just know where you're supposed to be bombing and hope you're hitting your target?
We have people on the ground that are calling targets, and they called them into a site that was radar controlled us to make sure that we were precisely where we should be. And I just remember calling those sites the miscue sites, MSQ, and I couldn't tell you what it stands for today. I forgot. But we would come in on target and line ourselves up, and then the miscue would take over and he would direct us, 1 degree left, 1 degree right, whatever. And he would put us precisely on that target. And then when it was time for us to release, he called the release. And our bombardier would just hit the pickle button, and
he was on the ground?
The miscue was on the ground. Yeah.
How big a group did you fly with? You didn't just go by one aircraft.
No. All our missions over there were in cells of 3 aircraft. And that was mutual defense. And that defense was primarily electronic. We could mask ourselves to the surface-to-air missiles. And we could confuse a MiG fighter with electronic. So that's, with us flying in 3s, we were a mile apart, and then we were separated by 500 feet. And the electronic jamming did protect us.
And who in the crew would operate that?
The electronic warfare officer.
Your responsibility was to get to the location?
2 pilots to fly the plane. Our job was to make sure we got it there on airspeed, on altitude, and on heading.
And then get back out after you dropped all your bombs. When you went to Thailand, was it an American Air Force base there?
No. It was a Royal Thai Air Force base.
Did they have quarters for you right on that base, or did you have to?
Yeah, we made our own. You've seen the steel shipping containers they put on and off cargo ships? It was one of those, but it's smaller than what you see today. And they just took a torch and cut a door in one of those, and we could get, it was four guys in one of those.
It must have been hot.
It was hot. And then as time went on, guys would take a torch and they'd cut a hole in it and get an air conditioner and plug that thing in finally. It was a hoot.
So that's where you slept. That was basically your barracks. Where did you eat?
We were on our own, but I went to the officers' club almost all the time.
Was there a separate officers' club just for the Americans?
No, there was one. The Thai officers would eat there also. There was a separate club for the enlisted people. So the two dining locations. And sometimes, depending on what time of day it was, we might go off base and get a local meal. And that was an experience.
How long did you fly out of the Thai base?
I tried to get most of my missions out of there. And
Why?
it was so different. Guam was miserable. And then towards the tail end of our involvement in Vietnam, they had increased the number of B-52s that were there. We flew D models, and they needed more planes, so they brought in the G model, much newer. And when the G models arrived, they put them on Guam, and they had no place for people to stay. So they put up old World War II Army tents, and that was your residence. So we liked our little steel container better.
How many aircraft did you have at the Thai Air Force Base? How big?
47.
40, and they were all B-52s?
Yeah, we had 47 B-52s. And we had a bunch of tankers that were there also, the KC-135s. And I couldn't tell you how many of those there were. We're on two different sides of the Air Force Base.
Did you fraternize at all with the Thai?
Yes.
Did they help the Americans on missions, or did you do separate missions?
No, Thais would help us with defending the base. And as far as missions go, the maintenance, the preparation, flying them, that was us. We would talk to some Thais in the control tower when we took off and when we landed, and that was about the extent of the experience with them.
How long were you at the Thai base? When did you leave there?
They would always send us home just before we got 6 months. If you went 6 months and a day, then you would go what they call a permanent change of station. And they were loaning us from Westover to 8th Air Force in Southeast Asia. And they wanted to keep us from getting that permanent change of station. So they would cycle us home and let us have 28 days in the U.S. and then cycle us back over there again.
So you did 6 months there, and then you came home to Westover Air Force?
28 days home and back over for 6 months.
And how long did that go on?
I had 4 tours. So 2 years actually in country.
Did you volunteer for 4 tours?
You don't have a chance. You don't have a choice.
What happened to that whole 1 year tour of duty?
Now, a lot of the Army people, the Marines, people who were on the ground in South Vietnam had the 1 year duties. And that was a permanent change of station. And ours, for some reason, they would do this cycling just short of 6 months. And we'd be on our way home to recycle and go back again. So ours was different.
When you came home after your first 6 months there, what was that like to readjust back to America?
For us, it was not too difficult. I think the quiet was one thing that was tough to get used to, because on an air base, there's always a jet engine running somewhere. And the constant noise of engines. We didn't have that. The mission pressure, we didn't have any of that. They basically gave us 28 days to just sort of decompress.
So you didn't have to fly missions in the United States?
We did. Yeah, because I remember bringing a plane back from Guam on our first return. They had us fly into Guam, pick up a B-52 from our unit in Massachusetts, and we flew it nonstop from Guam into Westover in Massachusetts. So we had some of our planes back here.
That must have been a pretty long flight.
19 hours, I believe.
It has enough fuel on board, or did you have to refuel?
Refuel, in-flight refuelings. And I think it was three in-flight refuelings to make him.
How tricky are the in-flight refuelings? Now you're the pilot, so you got to hold the plane still while they fuel it in. Um,
You come up behind a tanker and you have to stay within 33 feet of him. His boom can be extended hydraulically. It can be flown left, right, up, and down. Our job was to fly into the sweet spot and let him plug us, and then we would just try to match him absolutely perfectly so that he could transfer the gas without problems. It took some skill flying.
I think it'd take a lot of practice.
Yeah.
Do you have any disasters doing that?
You came close to one. One of our missions out of Guam, we had to fly over the Philippines and then into South Vietnam with an in-flight refueling over the Philippines. We got in there and we got into a typhoon. And that was a disaster. We were able to refuel, but we had St. Elmo's fire pushing off the front of the plane that must have been 100, 150 feet long, and we were passing gas between each other. It was probably the most dangerous thing that ever happened as far as refueling goes. And the plane was twisting, he was twisting, and yeah, that was close.
Wow. Now, when you're 28 days at home, did you live on base or off
Yeah.
base? So was your wife at home waiting all this time? So every 6 months she'd get to see you for 28 days?
Yes, and she was on base, and that kept herself right there. And when I got back, trying to ease back into our marriage, and we did okay with that. She and another gal decided they were going to get over somewhere closer to us, so that when we had some time off, like those 3 days that I was telling you about, that we could see each other. And she got a visa into Thailand and found a little place on the Gulf of Siam that was a secure compound. And she moved right into Thailand. So
For how long?
she was there the whole time I was there, the second trip.
So for a few years?
It was on that one she had 3 trips over there. The first one she stayed stateside, and the second, the third, and the fourth she was over there.
Each successive time that you went back to, did you go back to Vietnam in the next tours, or did you go back to Thailand or Guam? Were you always going to the same base?
We always went back to Guam just because it's en route, and we would work and do anything we could to get into Thailand.
So the second time you went back, did you get back into Thailand?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Did you immediately take up flying the same kinds of missions?
Absolutely, and that was concentrated mostly in South Vietnam. Yeah, you think about that, 1971, and that was the time when the U.S. Army was pretty much out of Vietnam. Most of them had gone home, and we were flying to give cover to the ARVN, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam. So we were in support of them.
And that was your second tour?
Correct.
Do you recall any particular missions from either your first tour or your second tour?
First tour was relatively boring. Yeah, we had missions. I think Cambodia was a big deal at that time. We weren't supposed to be in Cambodia, but all the ammunition stockpiles were over there. The road was over there. The troops were over there. So we were over there quite often. Also in Laos. Those were not bad missions. We had missiles that we had to worry about up around the DMZ. But down in South Vietnam, there was nothing to worry about. No missiles, no MiGs. And we used
So
to,
the first tour was relatively uneventful.
yes.
How about the second tour?
Second tour really began to make a change. And we got right into what they call Lam Son 719. And it was a mission where the ARVN were going in to intercept a large North Vietnamese army unit that was in Laos. And they were going to push them back up through Laos and then push them back through the passes back into North Vietnam and try to defeat them that way. So we were in support of them, and that ended up being a rout. They got a long way up into Laos, and North Vietnam just kept piling on them, and eventually they were overwhelmed.
Were these all ARVN, or were there American troops also?
No, it was ARVN, possibly some advisors that were American advisors with them.
Were you able to, so you were flying support, so what was your job? To bomb before they got there, or to bomb the fleeing North Vietnamese?
We were trying to pursue the North Vietnamese as the ARVN were pushing them. And then the other thing for us, we could try to trap North Vietnam in the two passes coming out of North Vietnam into Laos. And so that was an area that we worked a lot, where they had troop transports, ammunition, tanks.
You would bomb those two passes. What were those two passes?
Mugia and Ban Karai.
Now, in the second tour, were you in more danger from MiGs and SAMs?
Yes. Yeah, we were working around the DMZ. We were working in southern North Vietnam, and they had missiles down there at that time. I didn't really have problems with MiGs on that second tour. They were up there, but what they would do more than anything, instead of attacking us, was to fly in beside us and get our altitude and then radio to the missiles. And they would break off and the missile would come up on us. So,
What was the biggest danger?
the missiles, SA-2s.
How would you know if they had fired a missile at you?
Our electronic warfare officer could pick up a signal when they were tracking us on radar. The fan song radar had a sound. He could pick that up and know that they were tracking us. And when they launched, there was another signal that would come up that would guide it, and he could pick that up. So he would call the acquisition, and then he would call the launch. And after that, he was blind. He could try to jam it, but we had to try to find it visually.
You had to find the missile visually,
Right.
and then try to avoid it?
Yes.
That had to be pretty stressful.
It was pretty. You got some real tight moments. Yeah.
Could you actually see the missile? What was?
Oh yeah, yeah. We tended to fly our missions at night, and that was a real godsend when you were against the missiles, because when you finally picked it up, you were looking at a white donut of fire. So you could track that, and then if we could make that move on our windshield, we were not going to be hit by it. But if it ever got to the point where we would move to try to avoid it, and it stayed in that same spot in our windshield, we were going to get hit. So that's.
So the only way to avoid it was to move your aircraft out of its way?
Somehow do it. And then we would do what they call jinking, where you would slap the plane back and forth, up, down, anything to try to break that signal. And you could jink enough so you could get the missile to miss. We had one that was down there, and that was company Vin, Vin, North Vietnam. We were going against a high priority target, And we had a SAM that just locked onto us. We couldn't break it. And finally, I was flying co-pilot, and I told the pilot, I said, I'm taking the plane. And I turned it and I dove at the missile. And now he's coming at us at Mach 3 and we're subsonic, about 4 times the speed of sound, closing on each other. And then the question is, when do you try to maneuver? But I finally got to the point where I could see the missile inside that ring of fire. And I banked hard and dove, and it went off right beside the pilot's window. So we finally shook it.
Why did you dive? What was the strategy? What were you thinking behind that?
You're changing one of the parameters of the guy that's trying to control the missile. I'm in a turn, so I'm making him try to track me. I'm descending so that he's got another variable in there. With those two, it was about the only thing that I could do. In that rapid turn, when he's at Mach 3 and I'm subsonic, when I cranked it and pulled, it was just enough to get that to miss the plane. Yeah.
At that speed, those things must be pretty fast. You have to be able to make split-second decisions.
Yeah.
That has to be pretty stressful.
It was.
So like every mission you're flying on, you don't know if a SAM's going to come after you.
You never did. We knew up around Hanoi and Haiphong, we knew where a lot of the sites were. And that helps you when you're mission planning into a target. You know where to look. It doesn't help you as far as how many they're going to shoot at you.
Typically in a mission, how many SAMs might come at you?
My worst one, you and I were looking at the logbook, there was 17 on one and 20 on another.
So a mission, how long time-wise would a mission be?
Into South Vietnam was less than 4 minutes, 4 hours.
So in that 4-hour mission, in those instances where we looked in your logbook, you had 17 SAMs come at you in that 4-hour period of time in one instance and 20 in another?
Correct.
How did you handle the stress if you're flying for 4 hours with constant?
You're on straight adrenaline. Training is key at that moment because you have to be able to react absolutely instantaneously and correctly. And after we landed and got through debriefing, then we'd end up going straight to the bar.
And that's how you de-stressed?
That's how we de-stressed, yeah.
Do you have any memorable experiences from the second tour?
The second tour, I think the most memorable was that missile out of Vin that we couldn't shake. We had other ones that came up on us, but it was easier to maneuver to the point where we would break their lock on us and make them miss.
And after that second tour, you went back to Westover.
Back to Westover for 28 days. My wife and I went out to see her parents in Ohio, and we walked in the door out there at their house, and we're saying our hellos. The doorbell rang, and it was Western Union. They had a telegram addressed to me, and it said, "Return to your duty station by the fastest means available. This is a national emergency," and it was signed Richard M. Nixon.
What year? What was the date?
That would have been 1972. And what had happened was North Vietnam went on a push right through the DMZ, and they called it their spring offensive. It was like a Tet, where they would strike cities all over South Vietnam, but they began to use tanks. The tanks were coming through the DMZ. They got far enough that they took over the city of Hue, South Vietnam, and we were sent back immediately.
You didn't get your 28 days.
I got 2.
So you just arrived in Ohio. How'd you get back to Westover?
We drove out there in a 1969 MG BGT, and there was no airport that had a flight anywhere near Westover. Trains are too slow, buses are too slow. So we fueled up the MG and got back in, and we did, on the Pennsy Turnpike, I got stopped by a trooper because I was doing 110. And showed him.
Back in that big 52.
We showed him the telegram, and he saluted and said, "Good luck, buddy. Get out of here." I got stopped again in New Jersey on the turnpike. Once again, 110. Showed him the telegram. Good luck, buddy. And off we went, and we broke the speedometer. I have no idea how fast we got it up to, but we got back here, and it was like 8 hours and 15 minutes. And it had been a 12-and-a-half-hour trip out.
So you got back to Westover. What did you do? Get your gear and immediately head out?
They had broken into my house. They got all my flight gear, put it on a plane with my flight crew. And as we came in the front gate, then they took me out of the car. My wife had to go home. And I was on that plane, and we were on our way out to Vietnam again.
Did you go back to the same Thai base?
Yeah.
So now, because of this spring offensive, what did you do when you got there?
Immediately, we started flying missions. Most of those missions were in the DMZ or around the city of Hue.
Were they more intense missions, more SAMs, more MiGs? What was it like, and how was it different than the first 2 tours?
The SAMs were down there, and there weren't that many that we worried about. The MiGs were not there this time. None of them were down there, so we didn't have to worry about that. What we did have to worry about, now we're supporting the ARVN. And the ancient city of Hue was supposed to be preserved because there was a section of it that was very, very special to them. And our job was to try to destroy the North Vietnamese without destroying the city. We did okay.
How did you do that?
And real precise bombing. Real precise.
And again, that would be people on the ground
The miscues.
telling you exactly where to go and where to drop your bombs.
Exactly.
Were you successful in driving the North Vietnamese out?
Yes, we were. Yeah.
How long did that campaign go on?
That was probably a month to 2 months. It was a long battle. There were other places where they had come in to South Vietnam, and then the Viet Cong were attacking further south. So we had some missions to support the ARVN down there. But we were successful, and they were successful. We pushed them back out. Yeah.
In that month period, were you flying more often?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
would you say every day, every other day?
Every day.
So you'd fly a mission every day?
Yes.
And bomb someplace?
Right.
Usually right around Hue or
Yes.
in Hue?
Yeah. In the DMZ.
Do you have any memorable experiences from that tour?
That one ended up. One of the big missions that Nixon had. He loved football, so he codenamed it Linebacker.
That campaign.
That was Linebacker 1.
That was Linebacker 1.
Linebacker 1, and he let us loose and let us go up through to the 19th parallel. He wouldn't let us go any further north than that. But we began to take the war to them. That was when the harbor, the Haiphong harbor, was mined. So we shut down the shipping in there. We were hitting railroads, other transshipment points, roads themselves, any of the depots, ammunition depots, fuel depots, maintenance depots. We destroyed those.
So those were all your targets?
All our targets, big targets. It had to be big for something the size of that thing. But a lot of the ammo depots and a lot of fuel depots. I think the one that is probably most memorable, the North Vietnamese were building a fuel pipeline that was going to come out of North Vietnam through Bugia Pass and then down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And we got intelligence on where it was, and we struck that one night. And if the pipeline was straight like that, we came in on a slight angle so that the three of us could hopefully slice it and destroy it. We did. The flames that came out of that, we were probably at 31,000 feet, and I swear those flames went up to probably 20 to 25,000 feet. The biggest flame I've ever seen in my life. It seemed like it was going to reach right up and snap us out of the air. That was memorable.
Wow, that must have been impressive. Did you get photographs of any of these?
No. The plane has a camera on it, a strike camera. And yes, we did get photos of it, but we don't have access to them. So.
Was Linebacker 1 successful?
It was. And then they began to do the Paris peace talk negotiations, back and forth. And when they were in the talks in Paris, the North Vietnamese had asked for us to cease if they were going to be back at the talks, and so Nixon said yes. So he stopped us, and then
for how long did you not fly missions then?
A couple of weeks.
And did you stay in Thailand or go back to the United States?
We would go into Cambodia and Laos. We were still.
So you were still flying?
We're still flying missions.
Just not in South Vietnam.
North Vietnam. North Vietnam,
so
and then
to Laos and Cambodia.
Yeah, we're still going after the NVA. Sometimes we get calls to go down in lower Cambodia to support the ARVN against the Viet Cong. But yeah, we were there.
And how long did you not fly the missions while the peace talks were going on?
It was brief, because at that time the North Vietnamese negotiators weren't serious at all, and so finally Nixon had it, and then in December 18th, 1972, Congress had gone home for the holidays, and he had a chance to act under his presidential powers without congressional approval. And we got the message that it was to be maximum effort, was the way it came through. Destroy the North Vietnamese. And that's when Linebacker 2 started.
So what was your mission? How were you going to do that? And did you have any more leeway of where you could go?
Absolutely.
How did that change for you as a pilot?
Well, the pucker factor went way up. Because now we were going right into their backyard.
Where did you go?
We went to Hanoi and Haiphong. We took the war to them. And that was absolutely fabulous. You could feel this pride that finally, we're going to go into an all-out situation, all-out war, which is the way it should be fought. We went in, we destroyed all their fuel supplies. We destroyed all the ammunition depots. They had a huge railroad complex and a repair yard that was in Hanoi. And that thing looked like a junkyard when we were done with that. The roads were gone. We took out all their bridges. Haiphong, the harbor, was totally destroyed. Number one, they had nothing, no material to fight the war with because we took it all out. They had no way to get there because we had taken their roads and railroads and their bridges apart. They couldn't even fuel their vehicles because we destroyed all the fuel supplies. And they were on the phone immediately asking for a chance to go back to the peace talks. We started that December 18th, and the last mission I flew there was December 29th, 72. And we had done so much damage. Oh, the other thing we did, we took out all their airfields so that the MiGs couldn't come after us. That was
There are airfields in Hanoi and Haiphong, or
all
other
through
places?
North Vietnam.
You were busy in that one.
We were busy guys. First night we were up there, we took off with 47 planes out of Utapao, Thailand. And as we were going north up through Laos, we were going to go up to the China border and then fly down the Red River into Hanoi. They had 150 total B-52s coming at them because they launched
How many?
150.
All at one time, you guys all left?
Yeah, in other words, we call it the baby elephant parade because we were just all lined up. I mean, it was hours and hours of bombing. Knew that she was in Thailand. Our people did. And Air Force got a hold of her,
Your wife.
my wife, and said, go home. What they were doing, our chances were, they said, 1 out of 3 will never return. That's how bad the chances were. And they didn't want a distraught widow there. So all the wives that were over in country somewhere in that area were contacted, get out of here now. Next day she was on her way back to the States.
Wow,
It was-
pretty scary.
It was that serious.
So, go back to the baby elephant.
Baby elephant parade. As we're going north from Thailand up through Laos to the China border, you could see lights coming from Guam, the Philippines actually. And there were 100 B-52s coming along, and they were going to come in and line up behind us. So the first night that we went in there, it was 150 B-52s striking targets in and around Hanoi. And it was so huge that we've talked to some of the POWs afterwards, and they said the guys were cheering, jumping up and down and cheering. And they were yelling at each other, pack your bags, we're going home. So, yeah, it was an impressive.
Now, speaking of the POWs, you knew you had POWs in Hanoi. Were you worried about hitting the prison camp?
We knew exactly where they were. And then we had another POW camp that was called Dog Patch that was north of Hanoi. It's pretty close to the China border, so we had to watch out for that one. Yeah, but we did know.
Oh, so you could avoid those. So that month of December 1972, I'm guessing you were flying every day?
Yeah. And I didn't. For each plane that was over in theater, there were 3 flight crews. What happened,
So you could rotate?
they would rotate through to make sure that you had enough rest so that you didn't operate dangerously. But with that push, a plane would land, it would go straight into the refueling pit, and they would refuel it, and then it would be armed with bombs for the next mission. And as soon as it was refueled and armed, then they would send one of the flight crews out to go through and pre-flight it, make sure everything on that plane was ready for the mission, so that whoever the flight crew was that got that bird came out there, they could climb into it and basically know this thing is ready to rock and roll. So they would call that a pre-flight crew. And we did 2 days of pre-flight crews out of 9 of the 11 days of that battle. The rest of them we did fly.
Did you always get the same aircraft?
No.
So every time you went on a mission, it could be a different airplane?
And it was.
Oh.
It was.
They were all B-52s. Now you were still classified as nuclear mission, but you're still flying conventional?
This was all conventional, and the ones that we flew were all the B-52D models. The old
You didn't fly any of those new G ones that were coming in?
no, the G crews were qualified in their plane, and they were completely separate. Flew some of the same missions with us, into Hanoi especially, and they were not outfitted well for that battle. Most of them got slaughtered. They couldn't defend themselves electronically like we could. And the other thing that was sad about that, we were carrying 105 500-pound bombs on those missions for each one of us. And the G model could only carry 24. So they're carrying 1/4 of our bomb load and had no protection, and they got killed. Serious damage.
Were there any casualties in your unit?
Yes.
In which tour?
That was the linebacker too. I had lost my best friend in linebacker too.
He was in a different B-52?
Yeah, he was 3 planes behind me one night.
What was the biggest danger then? Still the SAMs?
The SAMs were our biggest problem. The MiGs were up there, and once again, they focused on flying beside us and calling back altitudes. They got in so close. We had 2 B-52s that shot down MiGs. That's how close they got to them.
What was the closest MiG that you saw?
Right beside my right wing. And it's one night, December 29th, we did a little bit of a tour of North Vietnam because we had destroyed everything. They ran out of SA-2 missiles, so they couldn't shoot at us. They had anti-aircraft artillery that were putting up a flak field for us, but you don't worry about that. But we drove right across Hanoi, went up to the northeast, turned, and we flew along the Red China border. And while we were doing that, a Red Chinese MiG came out and flew right in beside us, took a look at us, and lit his burners and went home. So that was close enough. You could see the pilot. But no attack from him.
Now you said you don't worry about the flak. Why do you not worry about the flak?
Not a damn thing you can do about it.
Oh.
Not a thing. I mean, there was 155 flak, so that's coming up to 35,000 feet. And all you could see at night were these gray-black clouds, and you knew that was all shrapnel. You got to keep on your mission. You can't avoid that. Yeah.
Was linebacker 2 during your 4th and final?
No.
So after linebacker 2 ended December 29th, were you able to go back to the United States at that point?
I did. I came back here for, I believe, 2 weeks, and then back over. And what was happening at that time, the Paris peace talks ended up with an agreement that we would not go into Vietnam again. The B-52s wouldn't strike North Vietnam and South Vietnam. And so we were relegated to either Laos or Cambodia, but the North Vietnamese were attacking Laos. And so we got into that battle.
When you went back for your
4th
tour, did you go back to Utapao?
Utapao.
So again, you're back in Thailand.
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah.
So, all right, so what were your missions during that tour?
We started out into Laos, trying to push the North Vietnamese back into their country. Most of that was in the Plain of Jars, which is a very famous old section in north central Laos. And then we worked in through the karst country, which is all huge, ragged hills between North Vietnam and Laos. They had some missions, believe it or not, that went into northern Thailand. The North Vietnamese had pushed that far that we had to push them back out of Thailand. And then the next thing that developed was Pol Pot in Cambodia started slaughtering his people. And we were brought in to try to take out some of his forces and his ammunition supply. So we worked around Phnom Penh quite a bit.
When did your fourth mission end?
August, no, excuse me, I was actually 73.
After they signed the Paris.
They signed the Paris peace talks in the end of January 73. I want to say that they started talks in the 13th, and I think that by 2 weeks after that, they had signed the Paris peace accords.
And when did you leave?
I got home. Our son was born in August 73, and I was home for his birth. So I probably right at the end of July, beginning of August 73.
Now, I know that you were awarded several medals and citations. Um, can you tell me what you were awarded and how you got them? I know that you received 3 Distinguished Flying Crosses. Why were you awarded each one?
Well, the first one was that the mission into Vin I told you about, where I was able to shake that missile. That was my first DFC. And the second and the third came when we were up during Linebacker 2, the missions into Hanoi.
What other medals or citations did you receive? I know you have a whole book of them.
Yeah. When I retired, I got sort of a standard, the Meritorious Service Medal. I think that's an attaboy. But I got that. Got the Air Medal with, I believe, 7 oak leaf clusters. Combat Readiness.
And we'll actually attach a list of all the medals and citations that John received.
Yeah, and there was, I got the Expeditionary Medal, and that was for the Laotian and the Cambodian camp in Thailand. And that's sort of an odd little medal, but yeah, that one. The South Vietnamese presented me with a South Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry with a palm on it, and that was for the Lam Son 719 operation that we did. There are other ones that are in there. Air Force Commendation, I got 2 of those. Yeah, there are quite a few.
Do you know how many hours of airtime you had in Vietnam?
Yeah, just under 900 hours of combat.
You had 900 hours of combat?
Somewhere around that.
Do you know how many missions you flew?
157.
All in a B-52?
Correct.
Did you sustain any injuries?
Not it's over there, no. Absolutely blessed.
A lot of close calls. Now, you came back to the United States at the end of the war. Did you stay in the service?
Yes, I did.
For how much longer?
I finally retired. I was medically retired in '78. And we came home, and Nixon and Kennedy had a little pissing contest. And Nixon's answer to Kennedy was, "I'm going to shut down your military base in Massachusetts." So he closed Westover. We got moved to Kinchlow Air Force Base in northern Michigan. And that was my last duty station out there.
Reggie, I'm going to ask you some questions about daily life. We've touched on this a little bit. Each time when you were over in Thailand or Guam, how did you stay in touch with your family?
My wife and I made tapes. We had the little cassette tapes we had. We would tape a letter to each other. So I could hear her voice and she could hear mine. And so the first tour, we mailed those back and forth to each other. That was a lot of fun.
Did you save any of those?
We did, but then finally they just rotted and finally they broke.
But
But
then
then
the second tour is when your wife started going over.
she went to Thailand. So when I had free time, then I would go to, I'm trying to think of the name of the little town, Pattaya Beach, Thailand, on the Gulf of Siam. And I'd go up and see her, and we'd have a 3 day time together. It was wonderful.
How often would you get a 3-day rest period?
Glad. Probably every couple of weeks I'd get a chance to see her.
Did you have any other leaves, like 2-week periods or anything like that?
Over there?
Yes.
No.
You just would get an
No.
occasional 3 days off.
Yeah. Yeah, the duty was, I was trying to remember, I think it was 5 days on and 3 days off.
All right, now you still lived, even when your wife came over and she had a place, you still lived in those
We called them
your
our,
barracks, what do you call it?
yeah, the shipping containers.
You lived in the shipping container on the
on the airbase.
and so for all your tours, then you lived in that shipping and never improved.
We had one that where there wasn't an empty shipping container, so that we had to live in what they call a hooch, the metal roof, a simple shed metal roof, and then open sides. So we lived in the hooch for a while until somebody got shipped out of the base, and we grabbed his shipping container.
So the most luxurious thing you lived in was either a shipping container or a hooch.
Yeah, well, the hooch was just a big zero.
Oh, that was even worse.
Yeah, the bugs were in it. The ties would come in and they go through your stuff. At least the shipping container, when we went to fly, we could lock it up.
And the food was always, you were on your own?
I was on my own.
So there was never a mess hall or a dining hall that you could go to?
No,
the Air Force is known for supposedly feeding their men well.
The enlisted people had a dining hall. The officers didn't. You were on your own.
Did you do anything special for good luck?
I don't remember. I remember flying with people that had talismans. No. The crazy part about it is the people that had the talisman were the ones that got killed.
Did you have a chance to see any USO shows while you were there?
Yes, I did.
Where and who?
It was during Linebacker 2, and it was the night night I lost my best friend, and I came back and I was pretty much stunned. And Bob Hope was there, and Ann Margaret.
So you actually got to see Bob Hope.
Yep.
Well, you were probably more impressed with Ann Margaret.
No, I can tell you this, that Susie and I went out west. We drove in 2009, and we stopped in Dayton, Ohio at the Air Force Museum. There are 3 hangars in that museum, and there's a long hall that connects all 3 of them. In that hallway is a picture of Bob Hope and Ann Margaret at that at Utapau. Yeah, I'm getting emotional about it. It was impressive.
Well, plus you'd already had a bad day.
Yep.
Do you recall any particularly funny situations?
Oh, yeah. The guys captured a python, and I think it was over 30 feet long. And the maintenance people built a cyclone fence pen for him. And we nicknamed him Pete the Python. And what do you feed a python? So we got some chickens and put the chickens in the cage. And pythons don't eat that often. These chickens got very comfortable with Pete, and so they'd be just walking up and down his back, sitting on his head. And when he got hungry, then there was all kinds of crazy. When he would grab a chicken. So we finally ended up saying, well, this is pretty cool, because we got a sheet of plywood and painted the thing up and then put days, hours, and minutes on the thing in this big grid. And you would put $1 on the hour and minute that you thought that Pete would eat a chicken. Whoever got the closest ended up getting the whole pile of money.
Did you ever win?
No. I'm unlucky on stuff like that. But then they ended up getting a monkey that was absolute. He was a little brute. He'd just steal our beer. He would do all kinds of stuff. So he threw the monkey in the cage with Pete. Then somebody had gotten an old broken down tree that had limbs on it, and Mike the monkey would swing around the cage from the wire and sit in the tree. And when he got bored, he'd grab a chicken by the neck and hit Pete with the chicken. And we get through with a mission and come back. You want to decompress? You want to go watch Pete and Mike? So.
Did Pete ever get Mike?
No. Mike was pretty quick. Yeah, they nicknamed him Iron Mike finally.
Reggie, what was your opinion of your fellow officers?
Absolute professionals. We lived together, slept together, ate together most of the time, flew together. I knew them. I spent more time with them than I did with my wife.
Did you stay in touch with any of them after the war?
We're still in touch.
Do you go to reunions?
We had a reunion of 3 of us, probably 3 years ago. And then my aircraft commander and I went to one of the River Rats reunions down in Washington, D.C.
What are the River Rats?
Anybody who flew in the Red River Valley, which is Hanoi and Haiphong, that's real hostile Indian territory. And if you flew up there, you could become a river rat. It's a great honor to be able to be one.
So how many of your friends do you still stay in touch with?
The flight crew.
The whole group?
Yep. All 6 of us are still alive. We send crappy emails to each other. Forward stuff that's as raunchy as we can find. Yeah. No, it's almost on every other day or so. We get an email from them.
Now you said you retired. You had a medical discharge. Were you
Yes.
injured while you were in the Air Force?
Yes.
What was the cause of your injury?
I was a passenger on a KC-135 that was flying in Michigan and going into Oscoda, Michigan for a landing, and the pilot flew the plane right into the ground. We were 40 miles away from the airfield and knocked down about 1,500 feet of hardwood forest, disintegrated the plane. I got out of it. There were actually 5 of us survived and 15 died. But I've been trapped in the thing and I was burned severely.
after surviving 4 tours in Vietnam?
I said the Vietnamese didn't get me, but one of my own did.
Do you know why he crashed?
He was an absolute he was incompetent, is the best way to say it. I was able to get the accident report, and this guy had failed. He was on that flight as a pilot with an instructor trying to teach him, but he was carrying passengers, and that's illegal. And
So you weren't even on duty.
I was on duty.
Why were you a passenger?
We were going out to Omaha, Nebraska, and that plane was picking up people from different air bases and taking them out to Omaha.
What year was that?
1976, September 26th. Never forget the day.
So that was pure pilot error.
Yep. It appears as though he froze up. He was cleared to descend from 13,000 feet to 3,000. He acknowledged that back to the FAA and ended up never stopping at 3,000, flew it right smack into the ground.
Did you know it was coming, or were you?
No.
So you were totally unaware.
Yeah. The only thing we knew was that last split second, oh shit, where he pulled he must have seen something, a tree or the ground or what, something. And he pulled as hard as he could on that plane. You could feel the G-forces. And then we hit a tree. That started the wreck.
So how injured were you?
25% body burn, 3rd degree. Almost lost both of my hands. They were going to amputate, but then they took me to Brooke Army Medical Center at the Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, and that's an experimental hospital. And they asked if I would give them permission to experiment on my hands, and the answer is hell yes. If I'm going to lose them, the answer is yes. And they saved both hands.
With new experimental procedure?
The left hand changed burn treatment worldwide. This hand was saved, but it's a mess. But they saved it, and it works.
After you recovered from the treatments and the burns, is that when you were discharged?
Correct. Medically retired.
What did you do after you were out of the service?
Tried to get jobs flying, and with my medical record, I am unemployable. I never got a job.
Did you go back to school at all on the GI Bill?
I did. I had an airline pilot's license, and I went back through airline pilot's training to revalidate that, just to prove that I could. So I did that. That was on the GI Bill.
Reg, how would you say that your military experience influenced your thinking about war or about the military in general?
I love it. I thrived in the structure of the military life. I love the adrenaline rush of flying.
What was it like for you when you got your medical discharge? Because you were getting that adrenaline rush for a long time. What was it like for you to adjust back to civilian life?
That was terrible.
How did you cope with that? Because that had to be a big letdown after being so active and having that adrenaline rush, and then to not do anything.
No. Yeah, I abused alcohol. That was my treatment. Self-medication, and that didn't work. That was years. And then finally, a high school friend of mine who had been in Vietnam, was in the Army, saw me one day and he said, "You need help." Um, he arranged for me to be seen by the VA. I didn't want anything to do with the VA, but he did, and I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, and I'm still being treated for it. Still go every 2 weeks, and then I've got a group at the vet center that I go to almost on a weekly basis. Still being treated for it.
Was the PTS from the stress from Vietnam or the crash after you returned to the United States, or both?
It started out with a crash, and then the more I got into it, the more they found that when I watched my friend vaporize, that I have combat PTSD also.
How would you say your military experience affected your life?
I think it's very, very positive. I have values, I have morals, I have ethics. I don't see much of that today.
Reg, is there anything you'd like to add or anything else that you can remember that we haven't talked about?
I really think that the one thing that strikes me immediately is that here I was, trained and ready to go with missions for the Cold War. Even there, when we were flying conventional missions in the hot war, and came back, and from 1973, my time at Kinchlow Air Force Base was all nuclear mission. And so there I was back in the Cold War again as one of the frontline participants. Nobody talks about the Cold War.
Did you fly any nuclear missions when you came back?
I did. We got launched once, and my go no go point was over Hudson Bay, and we got to my go no go point and orbited.
What's a go no go mean?
It was a control point. We would launch if there was something that the command saw that, or the president ordered us to. We would launch, and we would go to a predestined point and wait there until we got a code authenticating us to strike or to come home. So I was at the go no go line, and finally they called it off.
Do you know what the incident was?
Absolutely. Russia had ballistically launched 3 ICBMs all at the same time. No notification to the U.S. about it. And that got the nuclear subs armed. It got us launched. It got the missile silos opened. We were ready to go. So,
Anything else that you'd like to add?
I'd go back and do it again, Eileen. I really would. I look at stuff. We were in Phnom Penh one time. We flew a mission in there with a C-130 that was carrying ammunition to resupply the Cambodians, and I got absolutely disgusted with this world allowing the slaughter of 6 million Cambodians that Pol Pot killed. And we were sitting right in the middle they were all around us. And I could feel what those people felt. I've got a Buddha. The Buddha that's up on that bookshelf.
I'll take a picture.
Came out of Phnom Penh, Cambodia. And it was a Cambodian man who was huddled into a bombed out concrete structure, and I got in with him, and we carried these little books, pointy talkie, so we could communicate with each other. You know, Cambodian to English and English to Cambodian, and the two of us are going back and forth. And what he was trying to do was to get $20 American money, and with that, he could take care of his family for 3 years, and he could buy his way out of Cambodia. And I had a $20 bill, and he gave me that Buddha for it. Yeah, that was incredibly memorable.
Well, Reg, I'd like to thank you for your service to our country and thank you for this interview.